sada saha
avidyaya mrityum tirtva
vidyaya mrityum tirtva
vidyaya mritam ashnute
vidyaya mritam ashnute
vidyam cha yas
vidyam cha yas
tadvedo bhayam saha
tadvedo bhayam saha
avidyaya mrityum tirtva
avidyaya mrityum tirtva
vidyaya mritam ashnute.
vidyaya mritam ashnute.
Someone else chant?
Vidyam cha yas.
Vidyam cha
yas
yas
Tat vedo bhayam saha.
tadvedo bhayam saha
Avidyaya mrityam tritva.
avidyaya mrityum
mrityum
tirtva
tirtva
Vidyaya mritam anusnute.
vidyaya
amritam
mritam
ashnute.
ashnute.
Vidyam cha yas.
Vidyam
Vidyam cha
vidyayam
yas
yas
Vedo bhayam saha.
tadvedo bhayam saha
Avidyayam mrityum tirtva.
avidyaya mrityum tirtva
Vidyayam mritam ashnute.
vidyaya mritam ashnute.
ashnute.
Vidyam cha vidyayam cha yas
Vidyam
Vidyam cha yas
tadvedo bhayam saha
tadvedo bhayam saha.
avidyaya mrityum tirtva
Avidyayam mrityum tirtva.
tirtva
vidyaya mritam ashnute.
Vidyayam mritam.
amritam ashnute. Anyone else? Vidyam,
Vidyam,
knowledge in fact.
knowledge in fact.
Knowledge and
Cha,
Cha,
and.
and
Avidyam,
avidyam
nescience.
nation
Cha,
cha
and.
and
Yaha,
yaha
a person who.
a person who
Tat,
tat
that.
that
Veda,
veda
knows.
no
Ubhayam,
ubhayam
both.
both
Saha,
saha
simultaneously.
simultaneously
Avidyaya,
avidyaya
by culture of nescience.
by culture of
Mrityum,
mrityum
repeated death.
repeated death
Tirtva,
tirtva
transcending.
transcending
Vidyaya,
vidyaya
by culture of knowledge.
by culture of knowledge
Amritam,
amritam
deathlessness.
deathlessness
Ashnute,
ashnute
enjoys. Translation. Only one who can learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. Purport, Srila Prabhupada. Since the creation of the material world, everyone has been trying to attain a permanent life, but the laws of nature are so cruel that no one has been able to avoid the hand of death. No one wants to die, nor does anyone want to become old or diseased. The law of nature, however, does not allow anyone immunity from old age, disease, or death. Nor has the advancement of material knowledge solved these problems. Material science can discover the nuclear bomb to accelerate the process of death, but it cannot discover anything that can protect man from the cruel hands of old age, disease, and death. Someone else would like to read?
From the Puranas, we learn of the activities of Hiranyakashipu, a king who was very much advanced materially. Wanting to conquer cruel death by his material acquisition and the strength of his nescience, he underwent a type of meditation so severe that the inhabitants of all the planetary systems became disturbed by his mystic powers. He forced the creator of the universe, the demigod Brahma, to come down to him. He then asked Brahma for the benediction of becoming Amara, by which one does not die. Brahma said that he could not award the benediction because even he, the material creator who rules all planets, is not Amara. As confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 8.17, Brahma lives a long time, but that does not mean he is immortal.
Hiranya means gold and Kashipu means soft bed. This cunning gentleman, Hiranyakashipu, was interested in these two things, money and women, and he wanted to enjoy them by becoming immortal. He asked from Brahma many benedictions in hopes of indirectly fulfilling his desires to become immortal. Since Brahma told him that he could not grant the gift of immortality, Hiranyakashipu requested that he not to be killed by any man, animal, god, or any other living being within the 80 8400,000 species. He also asked that he not die on land, in the air or water, or by any weapon. In this way, Hiranyakashipu foolishly thought these guarantees would save him from death. Ultimately, however, although Brahma granted him all these benedictions, he was killed by the personality of Godhead in the form of Narsimha, the Lord, the Lord's half lion, half man incarnation, and no weapon was used to kill him, for he was killed by the Lord's nails. Nor was he killed on the land, in the air, or in the water, for he was killed on the lap of that wonderful living being, Narsimha, who was beyond his conception.
Someone else like to read?
The whole point here is that even Hiranyakasipu, the most powerful materialist, could not become deathless by his various plans. When then can be accomplished by the tiny Hiranyakasipus of today, whose plans are thwarted from the moment to moment. Sri Isopnisad instructs us not to make one-sided attempt to win the struggle for existence. Everyone is struggling hard for existence, but the laws of material nature are so hard and fast that they do not allow anyone to surpass them. In order to attain a permanent life, one must be prepared to go back to Godhead.
The process by which one goes back to Godhead is a different branch of knowledge, and it has to be learned from revealed Vedic scriptures, such as the Upanishads, Vedanta Sutra, Bhagavad Gita, and Srimad Bhagavatam. To become happy in this life and attain a permanent blissful life after leaving this material body, one must study this sacred literature and obtain transcendental knowledge. The conditioned living being has forgotten his eternal relationship with God and has mistakenly accepted the temporary place of his birth as all in all. The Lord has kindly delivered the above mentioned scriptures in India and other scriptures in other countries to remind the forgetful human being that his home is not here in this material world. The living being is a spiritual entity, and he can be happy only by returning to his spiritual home. Someone else?
From his kingdom, the personality of Godhead sends his bona fide servants to propagate this message by which one can return to Godhead. And sometimes the Lord comes himself to do this work. Since all living beings are his beloved sons, his parts and parcel, God is more sorry than we ourselves to see the sufferings we are constantly undergoing in this material condition. The miseries of material world serves to indirectly remind us of our incompatibility with dead matter. Intelligent living entities generally take note of these reminders and engage themselves in the culture of Vidya or transcendental knowledge. Human life is the best opportunity of the culture of spiritual knowledge, and a human being who does not take advantage of this opportunity is called a Naradhama, the lowest of human beings. The path of avidya or advancement of material knowledge for sense gratification is the path of repeated birth and death. As he exists spiritually, the living entity has no birth or death. Birth and death apply to outward covering of the spirit soul, the body. That is compared to the taking off and birth to the putting on of outward garments. Foolish human beings who are grossly absorbed in the culture of avidya nashans do not mind this cruel process. Enamored with the beauty of illusory energy, they undergo the same miseries repeatedly and do not learn any lessons from the laws of nature.
Anyone else like to read? Therefore, the culture.
Therefore,
Okay, go ahead.
okay. Therefore, the culture of Vidya or transcendental knowledge is essential for the human being. Sense enjoyment in the deceased material condition must be restricted as far as possible. Unrestricted sense enjoyment in this boldly condition is the path of ignorance and death. The living entities are not without spiritual senses. Every living being in his original spiritual form has all the senses, which are now materially manifest, being covered by the material body and mind. The activities of the material senses are perverted reflections of the activities of the original spiritual senses. In his deceased condition, the spirit soul engages in material activities under the material covering. Real sense enjoyment is possible only when the disease of materialism is removed. In our pure spiritual form, free from all material contamination, real enjoyment is the sense is possible. A patient must regain his health before he can truly enjoy sense pleasure again. Thus, the aim of a human life should not be to enjoy perverted sense enjoyment, but to cure the material disease. Aggravation of the material disease is no sign of knowledge, but a sign of avidya, ignorance. For good health, a person should not increase his fever from 105 degrees to 107 degrees, but should reduce his temperature to the normal 98.6. That should be the aim of human life. The modern trend of material civilization is to increase the temperature of the feverish material condition, which has reached the point of 107 degrees in the form of atomic energy. Meanwhile, the foolish politicians are crying that at any moment the world may go to hell. That is the result of the advancement of material knowledge and the neglect of the most important part of life, the culture of spiritual knowledge. Sri Isopnisad herein warns that we must not follow this dangerous path leading to death. On the contrary, we must develop the culture of spiritual knowledge so that we may become completely free from the cruel hands of death.
Anyone else?
This doesn't mean that all activities for the maintenance of the body should be stopped. There is no question of stopping activities, just as there is no question of wiping out one's temperature altogether when trying to recover from a disease. To make the best use of a bad bargain is the appropriate expression. The culture of spiritual knowledge necessitates the help of the body and mind. Therefore, maintenance of the body and mind is required if we are to reach our goal. The normal temperature should be maintained at 98.6 degrees, and the great sages and saints of India have attempted to do this by a balanced program of spiritual and material knowledge. They never allow the misuse of human intelligence for disease sense gratification.
Anyone else?
Human activities diseased by a tendency toward sense gratification have been regulated in the Vedas under the principle of salvation. This system employs religion, economic development, sense gratification, and salvation. But at the present moment, people have no interest in religion or salvation. They have only one aim in life, sense gratification. And in order to achieve this end, they make plans for economic development. Misguided men think that the religion should be maintained because it contributes to economic development, which is required for sense gratification. Thus, in order to guarantee for the sense gratification after death, in heaven, there is some system of religion observance. But this is not the purpose of religion. The path of religion is actually meant for self realization, and economic development is required just to maintain the body in a sound, healthy condition. A man should lead a healthy life with a sound mind just to realize vidya, true knowledge, which is the aim of human life. This life is not meant for working like an ass or for cul- culturing avidya for sense gratification.
The path of Vidya is most perfectly presented in Srimad Bhagavatam, which directs a human being to utilize his life to inquire into the absolute truth. The absolute truth is realized step by step as Brahman, Paramatma, and finally Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. The absolute truth is realized by the broad-minded man who has attained knowledge and detachment by following the 18 principles of the Bhagavad Gita described in the purport to Mantra 10. The central purpose of these 18 principles is the attainment of transcendental devotional service to the personality of Godhead. Therefore, all classes of men are encouraged to learn the art of devotional service to the Lord. Someone else? The guaranteed path to the aim of Vidya is described by Srila Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which we have presented in English as the Nectar of Devotion. The culture of Vidya is summarized in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.14 in the following words: Tasmad ekene manasa bhagavan sat patam patihi shrotavya kirtitavyascha jaya pujascha nityada. Therefore, with one pointed attention, one should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the personality of Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees. Unless religion, economic development, and sense gratification aim toward the attainment of devotional service to the Lord, they are all simply different forms of nescience, as Sri Isopnisad indicates in the following mantras. That's the end. The old one's a little different. Only one who can learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessing of immortality. Vidyam cha yas tadvido bhayam saha vidyayam ritum tirtva vidyayam ritamashnute. That was quite a purport, huh? So, Vidya and Vidya Darkness and light, ignorance and knowledge, matter and spirit, the temporary and the eternal should be understood side by side. Nasato vidyate bhavo, nabhavo vidyate sataha, upayorapi dristontas tvanios tattvadarshibhi. Those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent, the material body, there is no endurance, and of the eternal, the soul, there is no change. Matter is dull, it's lifeless, but when the soul is present, it undergoes 6 kinds of changes. Does anyone there know what these 6 changes are? Shadvikara? Yes, no, maybe? Well, the first one is birth. Then it grows. These are the changes that matter undergoes. There's birth, growth, staying for some time, producing byproducts, dwindling, and then vanishing or death. But the soul is constant, does not change. And to understand nescience, we really don't have to pursue it. We don't have to immerse ourselves in it or surrender to it and become totally absorbed in material life. We can learn by hearing from the seers of the truth who've learned from the Vedas. Actually, there's different classes of learning. First class learning is learning just by hearing. Second class learning is learning by hearing and seeing. You have to see for yourself. Third class is when, after hearing and seeing, you still have to experience it. And fourth class learning is when, even after hearing, seeing, and experiencing, one still does not learn. That's fourth class. But Veda means knowledge, it's perfect knowledge. And from the Vedas, we can learn everything. We can learn what is avidya and what is vidya. As Lord Krishna tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, Jnanam teham savigyanam idam bhakshyami asheshataha yaj gyatva neha bruyodnyaj gyatavyam avashishyate. I shall declare unto you in full this knowledge, both phenomenal and numinous. This being known, nothing further shall remain for you to know. And Srila Prabhupada has said that Krishna is so nice that somehow or other, if we just surrender to Krishna, we can automatically learn what is Maya. We don't have to separately endeavor to understand. Our focus just needs to be on trying to surrender to Krishna. Krishna will give us the intelligence within. As he says in Bhagavad Gita, I give them the understanding, I give the intelligence by which they can come to me. Chapter 10, the nutshell verses, to show them special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. Because the Lord is Chaitya Guru, he's in everyone's heart. He's the spiritual master in the hearts of everyone, and his external manifestation is the spiritual master. The Guru is a direct representative of Supersoul. We sing every morning, Sakshat Dari Tvena Samasta Shastrer, Uktas Tata Bhavyat Eva Sadbi. That's the verdict. The verdict of all the Shastras is that the spiritual master should be respected as much as good as God. He's as good as God for us. And it's also accepted by great devotees. Should be. By the mercy of Krishna, one gets Guru, and by the mercy of Guru, one gets Krishna. Srila Prabhupada said that the mercy runs in parallel lines, that we have to have faith in both the Lord and in the spiritual master. And that's when all the imports of Vedic knowledge are revealed. The truth of understanding Vedic knowledge. What is that? Yasya deve parabhaktir yata deve tatagaro tashaite katita yarta prakashante mahatmana. The Svetavsvatara Upanishad says that unto the great souls who have both faith in the Lord and the spiritual master, all the imports of Vedic knowledge are automatically revealed. And Srila Prabhupada has said that being faithful to both Krishna and the spiritual master is the secret of success in spiritual life. There's so many little secrets of how to be successful in spiritual life, and this is one of them, is to have faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master. So Prabhupada starts off by saying that no one wants to die. We all want to avoid the inescapable hands of death, the cruel hands of death. And he's given the extreme example of the great, powerful materialist Hiranyakashipu to show to what extremes one may go to for trying to stop death, to become immortal and gain power to facilitate their sense gratification, specifically in his case, the enjoyment of money and women. Haranya means gold and Kashipu, soft bed. And he performed severe austerities, unlike anyone, 125 years on the tips of his toes to gain a benediction from Lord Brahma to become immortal. But you can't give something you don't have. And Lord Brahma, even though he lives for millions of billions of years, he still has to die. So he was unable to grant him immortality. But Hiranyakashipu, he tried to, like he was sneaky, or he was witty, and he tried to gain immortality by not being killed on the land or the sea or the sky, inside or outside, by the hands of the man or a beast. What were some of the other ones? By any weapon, so many things. But he was outsmarted by Lord Nrsingadev, even though he was trying to use trickery to gain immortality. He was outsmarted by the wisest of all, by the Lord, in the form of Lord Nrsingadev, who met all his wishes. He was neither man nor beast. He was both. He was not killed on land, in the water, or in the sky, but on the lap of the Supreme Lord. He wasn't killed by any weapon, but by the nails of the Lord. And Prabhupada says that today we have tiny Hiranyakashipus who are not as powerful or materially advanced, but they have the same goal, same goal as the large Hiranyakashipu. Money, power, prestige, women. But the only way to really attain immortality is to follow in the footsteps of the Prahlad Maharaj, become a Prahlad-like devotee who was always in constant remembrance of the Lord, who constantly took shelter of the Lord. He gained the Lord's protection. Mare Krishna Rakhe Rakhe Krishna Mare Ke. If Krishna wants to kill you, no one can save you. If Krishna wants to protect you, no one can kill you. Prahlad Maharaj's strength was spiritual strength, which is the most powerful. With spiritual strength, you can gain the power over birth, death, old age, and disease. You can gain the power to never return to this material world. That's real immortality. And in the purport, Prabhupada mentioned how Krishna, he's more sorry than we are to see our suffering. He wants us to return back to Godhead, where there'll be no more suffering in his blissful eternal association. He cares so much for us fallen souls that he gives us his scriptures. He sends his messengers, his representatives, his incarnations. He comes himself to reclaim all us fallen conditioned souls in this world back to our original home. He wants us to turn to him like those two birds in the tree. There's the enjoying bird and the witnessing bird. And the witnessing bird is just waiting for that enjoying bird to turn back to his eternal friend. We're like fish out of the water. We're trying to enjoy in a foreign atmosphere, but the result is simply suffering. Birth involves suffering, old age involves suffering, disease involves suffering, death involves suffering. There's so many ways that this body can suffer, so many more ways than it can enjoy. And Krishna, he reminds us that we don't belong in this material world. And he reminds us by the miseries that we have. We can see the miseries as a reminder that we are away from our natural habitat, that we're incompatible with matter. And devotees actually see reversals as blessings. And the blessings are greater, so much greater than what the devotee has to suffer. The suffering the devotee experiences, he sees them like a springboard. I know you're probably familiar with diving boards in swimming pools. First they go down, so that's like the difficulty. First you go down, but then it springs back up higher than it was before. So that's how these difficulties or stumbling blocks, so-called stumbling blocks on our path, seem to a devotee. They're seen as a test. You know, will we take shelter of Krishna? They can help us to become stronger in our devotion. And that's why Queen Kunti prayed, Vipada Shantuta Saswat Tatra Tatra Jagakaro Bhavato Darshanam Yashyat Apunar Bhavadarshanam. I wish that all those calamities would happen again and again so that we could see you again and again. For by seeing you means that we no longer see repeated births and deaths. Of course, we don't need to pray for calamities in this world. It's full of calamities. There's danger at every step. We just have to practice remembering Krishna when placed into the difficulties so that we'll be prepared for that final ultimate test, which we all know, Ante Narayana Smriti. Will we remember Krishna at the end of this life? So when we see these difficulties come upon us, we can remember how the devotees, Tate Nukampam Susamikshamano Bunjana Evatma Kritam Vipakam Vidbhag Vipur Bir Vidatan Namaste Jiveti Yo Mukti Pede Sadayabak. How the devotees, they earnestly await for the Lord to bestow his causeless mercy on them while patiently suffering the reactions of their past misdeeds. And still they offer their respectful obeisances in their heart and with their words and with their body. And they're eligible for liberation. And it says it has become their rightful claim. Just like if a rich man has a son and he passes on, the rightful claim for this son is the wealth of the rich man. In the same way, liberation is the rightful claim for one who, for that devotee who offers his respects to the Lord, all the while suffering the reactions to his past sins. Although, according to Bhagavad Gita, one who surrenders to Krishna is no longer liable to suffer the reactions of his past sins. But in order to remove the last vestiges of the enjoying spirit from the heart of his devotee, Krishna sometimes gives punishments or reactions that seem like sinful reactions. And the purpose, because the purpose of this whole creation is to rectify the living entity's tendency to enjoy separate from Krishna. And so particular punishment is designed to curtail that enjoying mentality. It's actually the Lord's mercy for inducing his devotees to let go of this material world and to go home back to Godhead, to where we once came from, where we belong. And this body, this situation we're in, is considered to be a bad bargain. But we're here, somehow or other, we've found ourselves in this position. So we should make the best use out of it, not the worst use. The worst use is not to take advantage of this human form of life and to glide down further into the darkness of ignorance, nescience. The best use is to take advantage of all this knowledge, all this help, or these helplines that the Lord has cast our way, and by His grace attain real immortality in Goloka Vrindavan, where life is eternal, full of bliss and knowledge. The best use of our bad bargain is, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7:19, Bahunam janmanamante gyanavan mam prapajante vasudeva saramiti samahatma sadurlabha. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. That's the proper use of our intelligence. That is intelligence. That the wise, actually Gyanavan means very intelligent or wise. And one who is wise surrenders to Krishna. He has seen the truth. He has understood the nature of nescience. He's understood the nature of transcendental knowledge, both side by side. He's the true knower, the seer of the truth. And he can therefore enjoy the blessings of immortality. Are there any questions thus far? This purport was very long. I tried to go quickly through it.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Mataji, one quick question. Sometimes people ask this question that, why is it that if the living entity has to enjoy, he has to enjoy only with Krishna, and otherwise he cannot enjoy and he has to come to material world and suffer? So if that is the case, how is the Lord merciful? If he is merciful, then he should let the living entity enjoy,
Well, I think maybe this person doesn't know what real enjoyment is. Most of the so-called enjoyment in the material world is simply relief from suffering. We're all suffering. We're suffering birth, death, old age, disease. We're suffering due to separation from Krishna. Most of us can't even see our suffering. But Krishna and the spiritual master, they understand how the fallen conditioned souls are suffering. So they try to help them by this knowledge that our real enjoyment is not due to some external material stimuli, but it comes from within, from connecting with Krishna, from realizing who we really are as eternal servants of Krishna. We're made up of bliss. Our true nature is to be happy. So if they were enjoying here, they would be enjoying all the time. Can anyone say that they're enjoying all the time? Here in the material world, there's more suffering than enjoyment, so-called enjoyment. The enjoyment is so small, it's so temporary, and people work so hard to try to enjoy. Krishna's mercy upon us is that we actually suffer here. So we can realize, like Prabhupada said in the purport, that we don't belong here. So sometimes his mercy is also that we can see that this body is not a place of enjoyment. Like the fish out of the water. If you see a fish out of the water, is your kindness by trying to make him comfortable out of the water? By giving him nice, comfortable, nice foods to eat, a bed to lay in, or a house? No, your mercy or your kindness to that fish is to put him back into the water, into his natural habitat.
Mataji, thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, Mataji, it does. Thank you so much.
But for the devotee, it's not like they're suffering, I didn't mean to say that, Krishna's mercy is just is suffering, that we should be suffering all the time. But actually by engaging in the process of devotional service, it's enjoyable, the process, Rajavijam, Rajaguyam. he gives us a glimpse of what the spiritual world can be like, is like. He gives us an idea. But when we engage in his service, the pleasure that we get is just like a drop of the pleasure that can be experienced in the spiritual world. And that pleasure is so much greater than any material pleasure that one can experience. What is the material pleasure that people experience? What makes them happy? Eating, sleeping, mating, defending.
Basically, sensory pleasures.
Yeah. And how much can you enjoy the senses? The body is built more to suffer. You can suffer in so many ways. Your little teeny finger can cause so much pain.
Yeah, that's true, Mataji. Our enjoying capacity is limited,
Very limited.
very limited.
And people take intoxication. That's to relieve them of their suffering. It's
Yeah,
not real enjoyment, it's just some attempt of relief.
right.
Which causes more suffering later. The attempts of enjoying usually cause more suffering later.
So we are saying two things. One is that um, the the pleasures, first of all, are not so much fulfilling. They do not, fulfill our longing for pleasure so much. And even if we find some pleasure that may be very fulfilling for us, but still our enjoying capacity is limited. How much can we eat? You know, we can only eat so much. That's what we are trying to say, right, Mataji?
Yes. Yeah, and those are temporary, where spiritual enjoyment is eternal. So therefore we stress the spiritual. But there is some sense of pleasure. I'm just thinking of the different modes of material nature. Like, what is it? Happiness in the mode of ignorance is, my husband knows. What's happiness in the mode of ignorance? It's like difficult in the beginning and suffering at the end.
Poison in the beginning, poison in the end also.
Yeah, there's no happiness. And then the happiness in the mode of passion is like
Nectar in the beginning, but
the
poison it.
beginning, but poison in the end. But happiness in the mode of goodness is poison in the beginning, but nectar at the end. But it's temporary. There's a nice film that devotees did, Little Fish, Big Fish. And it really illustrates the point nicely about how the fish out of water, tries to enjoy, intoxication and eating abominable things and all these things. But he's so uncomfortable the whole time because he's out of water. And he just wants to be the big fish, this whole time, and he's striving so hard to become the big fish all the while he's suffering this uncomfortable position being out of water. And finally he thinks he makes it to be the big fish, but he didn't quite make it. Any of you seen it? It's really good. It's fun. The devotees made it years ago. What? Gaur Hari and I think Kalakanta wrote it.
What?
Kalakanta wrote it? Big Fish, Little Fish?
Corey played it. You
Yeah.
can see it on YouTube.
How did it end? He wanted to be the big fish.
And he just follows the big fish, and then then he's happy.
He realized he had to follow the big fish, and then he
Something
is
like that. It was wasn't
back into the
exactly
water.
like-
And anyway, it illustrates the point nicely in a humorous way too. So that. There's some on the floor. It was a long purport. I don't know if we missed anything. I just tried to touch upon a few things there.
Mataji,
Yes?
I was just talking about the fish and stuff. I was reading something today about if a snake gets overheated, it actually tries to eat itself. I was
Whoa.
like, that's such a metaphor for the material world, isn't it? We're so desperate
Wow.
to enjoy that we destroy ourselves.
Oh my goodness. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, apparently if they get overheated, they just get disoriented and their metabolism starts to get so high that they have to eat something. And if there's nothing around, they will mistake their own tail for another snake and try to eat it.
Wow. Is that just a particular kind of snake or snakes in general?
They said snakes in general.
I was
very
thinking
weird.
of a rattlesnake, at the end of his tail, he has, would he?
Yeah, that's, I guess they find it more with snakes in captivity, obviously, because they can't just slither off and go find a mouse or something.
Right, right.
But it was like, and in captivity kind of makes sense too, because we're in jail here. It just seemed like such a metaphor for the material world, being we're like that snake.
We have so many teachers all around us. It's like a big classroom.
Right?
This material world. Yeah. Krishna
Okay.
sends messages in so many ways.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to share that because I thought it was really potent to think about that one, especially when I hadn't really thought about it in that metaphor until you start talking about the fish. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well.
Haribol. Thank you. Anybody else? Any realizations? But a pure devotee, he's in the spiritual world wherever he is. So there is no question of suffering, even if there appears to be suffering. And reversals often turn out to be blessings. I was thinking when we were talking about that earlier, the two Arjun trees, Manigriva and Nalakuvara, they were cursed to stand as trees for a long time. May seem as a unfortunate, but ultimately it was a blessing when Krishna himself knocked the trees down and they regained their original position. So we get a lot of tests in our life, in our spiritual path. We can take them as opportunities to try to remember the Lord, a little test. Like Prabhupada said, our chanting should become habitual so that when we're faced with these difficulties that we will be able to turn to Krishna in his holy name and chant with our heart, our mind, and our soul with feeling. Take shelter like the Prahlad Maharaj, Queen Kunti. Okay. If there's no further questions, comments, or anything, we can end here.
Hare Krishna, Jiva Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Happy Diwali, Mataji.
Happy Diwali to you and everyone else.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Glories to Srila Prabhupada.
I'm very special.
Vanchakalpa Tribhischa Kipasindhubhyevacha Patitanam Bhavam Vaishnavebhyo